I was working recently with a customer education team at a fairly large organization, and they were struggling with some of the same, issues and challenges that I've seen at organizations of all sizes, whether startup, mid-size, enterprise. There's some very consistent challenges that customer and product training teams face, and one of those is really getting kind of stuck or mired down in very specific and granular requests from other teams to create trainings, whether that's, there are new features coming out or a new product launch, or just, some very specific, like we need a course or a training or a tutorial or whatever that covers XYZ. And when you're sort of set up to address these requests, you get into a very reactive, very granular mode of working. And it can be very challenging for a team like that to make a larger impact in the business, because really your success just comes down to, are we meeting the requests? Okay, well, yes, we built that course. And then you're maybe looking at how fast you build the course, but eventually you end up with a large body of content that is really not connected directly to any massive business impact. And so, this is a problem that, like I said, it can be in a small company or a larger company. It just is something where we see these education teams that are set up to be more reactive. And even when there's more of a proactive approach to a roadmap, maybe we're looking at like, okay, we're going to proactively build all these pieces of content. It still is somewhat very much a granular or tactical approach to addressing a very specific, focus area or request. And one way that an education team like this can really sort of shift gears a bit and make a broader business impact is by moving into a more strategic and proactive focus, where we're really looking at the overall business problem that we're solving and not all the very specific pieces of educational content that you're going to be building. So while I was working with this team, we started to talk through, okay, what are the problems that you've heard from other teams and other parts of the business? And we started to see a trend with multiple, like, for example, we looked at a partner enablement issue that came up. And so there was a known potential problem with partners at this company and potentially not having the right resources to be able to sell the value of the software, which is not uncommon. We see that a lot with partner programs. They need almost like a sales enablement, where it's really just understanding the value to be able to sell that on to others. And so we identified this partner program that had come to the team. Sorry, this partner problem. And then when we look at that at a bit wider scale, we start looking at like where are potentially other segments struggling with understanding the value of the product. And so, as you might imagine, that's not a isolated problem. That's something that we see at various segments. We can see that in the prospect segment for those that are maybe just getting used to the product. Maybe they download a trial version of the product, and so they need to really be bought into the value of that product. We see that, of course, with customers that are already signed up. Maybe they are not using it to their fullest extent because they don't understand the value that's really potentially able to drive them. And then we do see it internally with employees. So when you look at this problem with a different angle, we're no longer looking at it from the lens of one issue that was brought to the team, but we're stepping back and we're like, well, let's see where this issue may exist in other segments. Now we have a really larger bird's eye view of this potential, problem that we could solve for the business. And now we can design a program, an educational program that's targeting this particular problem. And so, that gives you we're now looking at this more strategically. We're looking at a much wider scope, and we're not trying to solve one problem for one audience. Now, what do you do next? Once you really start to understand these different segments and the problems they're having, you may see that some of the segments are having, they need overlapping kind of competencies to be able to reach their goals. So for example, with the partners, we know that, as I mentioned, they need to be able to understand that value so they could sell it. That's the same that we see internally with our sales team, right? So we have an overlapping need there. Then with our prospects, for example, the ones that have downloaded a trial version, they need to understand that value as users, right? They need to actually see that value and be able to realize that value, so they will then actually download or purchase the software. And that's a very similar use to those that are already using it, right? Like the segments that are actually already working with your product, you want them to really understand and absorb that value so that they will increase their use of it and or renew or expand their use of the product. And so we see very two distinct paths, one about selling, one about using. But now we can start to understand how we can build a modular competency framework that addresses this problem. First, we have a foundational level that everyone needs to know. What is the product? What is the main value props? Why would you use this? And then we go into more specifics around competencies to sell and competencies to use. So we start to build this sort of curriculum that can be modular across different segments, but can also get more specific as we go farther and farther into it. So it doesn't mean that on day one, we're building an entire curriculum to cover all of these segments for all of these goals. But when we build it, we're building it with the sense of like, this is applicable to actually multiple segments. And then we can prioritize and get more specific as we get, clearer into the needs of different segments. This helps you get a lot more efficient with your workflow so that you could solve, for example, let's say that partner problem is a priority. We've identified in the business that that's something we have to address. We can prioritize that. But as we build that, we're also considering these other segments so that once we finish with our partner learning experience, we don't have to start from square one to now build something for our prospects, for example, or our trial users. We have a lot of that We have a lot of that overlapping content. We have the modular content that we've already built that would be applicable for this other use case as well. And now we can just add on to that to get more specific with that learning experience. So this, instead of somebody just coming to the team saying, hey, our partners don't know how to sell, build something for that. We take a step back. We think about what is the program strategy behind this. And that's back to like, what is the problem or opportunity we're solving for? That's the first of my dimensions that I reference on Echtus.com, the 7 dimensions of education strategy. The first one being program strategy. What are we building? What program is this? What are we solving for? And then moving into audience strategy. What are all the audiences that are potentially part of this program or part of this problem or opportunity we're solving for? And again, just reiterating, it doesn't mean you're solving for all of that immediately. It just means that you have this strategy in place. So as you build, you have clarity and you have efficiency to actually create a much larger impact than if you were just answering the one request that came to the team.